If you are using automation in the no-code space, sometimes you might find yourself wondering, is this it? Are there more advanced automation options? Well, I'm happy to announce that thanks to tools like Ply, the one we're going to be using in today's video, there are some pretty darn advanced things that we can do with automation. So in this tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to build a human-in-the-loop automation with Ply, and we're going step by step. So if that's of interest, stick around and let's get into it. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Gareth and this is Gap Consulting. It's our mission to help you unlock the full potential of no-code tools, and Ply is one of those no-code tools that we use and love in our business. Now in this video, as I mentioned, we are going to be taking a look at human-in-the-loop automation. This is more advanced than standard automation, but it's still easy for you to build with no coding required. So you can follow this step by step and produce the same output that I'm going to do here. I'm not going to use a single line of code. Before I get into all that though, I first want to invite you to join me for some free training. I've put together an automation webinar for you. It's going to teach you the fundamentals of automation. So if you're just learning or if you need a refresher, grab that training at gapconsulting.io/webinar-registration. But without further ado, let's go ahead and hop on into my screen. I am going to be starting from my email because what I'm envisioning here is, let's say I got an email from somebody. In this case, I just emailed myself an empty body from and to me. It's just, the part that matters is that we received an email and we opened it up. Now, let's say that when I get this email, I want to push a button in my email and save it to my CRM. Like maybe I get 100 emails a day, but only one or two of them are actually worth saving as a contact in my CRM system. And let's assume for our example that I've built that CRM in Airtable. So here we've got contacts over here on the left. I've got companies and I have interactions. So the major components of this are not important, but what does matter is that I've got contacts connected to companies. So a company can have one or more contacts associated with it. So if we think through what we want this automation to do, right? Here we are in our email. We want to be able to trigger something by pushing a button that says, hey, this email, take this contact and put them in my CRM. But how do we know what company they're with? Do we already have that company inside of our database, or do we need to create a new company? Is that a company that already exists and we're just adding on a new contact? Like there are so many possibilities, and this is where a human-in-the-loop component comes in handy. So a traditional automation, when we trigger it, we just push it or initiate it, and it just does the thing. Well, a human-in-the-loop automation, advanced automation with Ply, includes or incorporates you in some component of the automation process. So that when I start the automation, that's part of it, but then I might get some prompts that ask me about more information. So we can imagine a scenario that says, is this person or does this company already exist in your CRM? And if not, create a new one. So let's walk through this automation. Now, the first step is going to be building the button, the trigger that occurs right here inside of my Gmail account. So in order to do that, I have already installed the Ply Chrome extension. I am using Chrome browser. Now, Ply is built with Chrome in mind. I've heard rumor that it does work on other browsers, but I'm a Chrome user. I would encourage you to use Chrome if you want to include Ply because that's what it was built for. So I'm going to go ahead and hit that extension up at the top and create an add-on. You notice that it already knows that I'm in Gmail. So it knows what it's looking at and it's like, I can create an add-on for that. So we're going to do that. And now it's going to ask us to sync up our account once it's loaded, and we will choose our workspace. Now, if you haven't already integrated your Gmail with Ply, you'll get instructions on this screen to do so. Once that's done, we can continue and we're going to choose what we want to do. So in our scenario, we're getting this email, we're opening it, and we're saying we want to add this person to our CRM. So we want to create this button so that it's right inside of our system. Now, from here, it's going to allow us to actually create the button inside of my Gmail when I'm inside of Chrome, when I am more specifically inside of an email message. So I'll say, okay. And note, this is the little highlighted area. This is where it's going to be putting that button. And we are going to select this. and we can set that button up. So we can choose an icon for it. Let's say I want to put it here as the person finder, or no, I'll do the plus person. We're adding someone to the CRM. This one tracks. We can change the color here. Let me go with the blue. And we can even add a little tooltip. So I'll say add to CRM. There are more design options. I'll skip them for now. I'm going to save this button, and now it's opening up the builder. So this is where we're coming in to build what happens when that button is hit. So what we're going to do first is get the contextual message from Gmail. So whatever email we have open up right now, it's going to get that information. So this part, this little next step is already included for us because we added the button to the message. Next, we're going to look at Airtable. We want to look at our integration with Airtable. So we're going to choose an app, integrations, and find Airtable from the list. Now, what do we want to do in Airtable? Well, we want to create a record. We're going to be creating a new record inside of our CRM. Now, in full transparency, if I were doing this in my own system, I would also add a search for record. I would do a search first so that I could not move forward if the record already exists. So I could build a little step that says, hey, look for this person. If they already live in our CRM, if we've already created a record, then stop this automation. In this case, though, for simplicity, I'm just going to say, let's assume that we already know that this person isn't in the CRM. So we're going to create that record, and we've got our authorization to Airtable already set up. If you need to redo it, you can follow step-by-step instructions. Now we need to connect it to our database. So we're going to go into base ID, and we can do a search here for the name. Ours was called CRM template. That's the database that we have. And where are we creating this record? Well, for us, it's going to be a contact. Now, let's really quickly, before we go on to mapping the fields, let's look at the data that we get from the contextual message. We're going to find now the email that we want to pull in data from, and I'm going to blur out these other ones, of course, just in the name of privacy, but this is the email we're looking for, test email for automation, and I will look at this email and get the context of it. So let's see the sample data. So we can see all the information from who sent the email, what their name is, etc. This right here, the from name and the from address, this is what I care about the most. And so this is what I'm going to use when I create that contact. But of course, I don't know yet if they are a member of an organization that I already have in my database or not. But for now, let's just create the actual record in our create record step. So I have that information from the previous step. I know what it looks like here, and I'm going to map to it here. So I have the name already available to me, and I have the email address. That all lives in the contextual message. So let's find that information here in the body. So I've got the from, and it was called from address, so we can drop that in. And the from name, actually, in my database, I've built first and last name. I could split this information out, but for simplicity, I'll just put it all in the one first name field. So I'll come in here and I'll say from name. So I'm just going to drop the full name here in my first name field. Now, you'll notice I don't know the company, and I've got a bunch of example companies already in my demo database here, but I don't know which one belongs to this person. Maybe I need to create a new one. So this is where we can come in and actually add a new step in our automation, and this is where we're going to bring human in the loop. So in order to do that, let's come over here and add a new step between the getting the contextual message and then creating the record. So here we're going to ask a question, and we need that human interaction. This comes in the form of a user step. So here are the common user steps. We can do an interface, a form screen, we can do an ending, or we can have an integration mini app. So wow, Stripe, Embed, Google Docs, a lot of more advanced things. Well, for us, just a little interface on our screen is going to be perfectly sufficient. So let's use this. And what we're going to do here is actually add a question, but what I want to know is, does this company already exist in our database? So we can ask that question and just have essentially like a drop down. Let's look for, yeah, here we go. We can have a toggle. We could use that. We could use a checkbox. We could use a drop down with two options, yes or no. Let's come up with a drop down label that says, does this company exist in our database? And we can make this required, and then we can give two options, yes or no. And for more context, we could even say need to create. And so if they choose yes when running the automation, then we're going to say, well, show us the list and pick from this list of companies and tell us which one it is. And if the answer is no, then we need to pop up a different thing that says, okay, well, now you need to tell us, what company to create in our database. So this is the next layer that we've now added here, right? Which is perfect. So now we need to build a little bit of logic into our automation. So let's go ahead and close down our side panel. And right here, after this question is answered, that will dictate a path. So we're going to add a little plus here and drop into some logic, and we're going to put together a branch. Note that we have other options as well, other more complicated outputs that we could have here. But for us, we're going to use this branch. And so we're going to say on branch 1, if the answer from this previous question is yes, then we're going to do this way. And of course, if the other answer is no, then we're going to go a different direction. So what happens here? If we are in our branches, and we're going to say run branch 1, and we're going to edit this. This will be if company exists. And if the company exists, then we need to look for it, right? And so what is the condition to see if the company exists? Well, in this step, the interface step, which we haven't finished setting up yet, if the answer is yes. Now, the other branch here is the default branch. Again, if we click here into branches, we can rename this to say otherwise. So really quickly, let's go back into our interface and give it a little test so we can run with sample data. So this is what it's going to look like. It'll pop up a little interface, human in the loop, and we'll make a selection. We'll say done. Now this is getting the thumbs up from Ply, and we can move on to that branch logic, which is not yet set up. So let's go back in here and say interface. If the answer is yes, if it exactly matches yes, that way we know now the company exists, we're going to do something. And if it doesn't, we're going to do something else. Look at this other branch logic here. We don't even have to set it up because in our case, we just have 2 options. So if it's not yes, obviously it's no. So let's build the first branch of the logic if the company exists. We'll click in here and we will say, if they exist, then we need to pull back all of the companies that we find in Airtable and then present them to the user and say, which one? So we can add another user step here. We can add another interface where we say, which company is it? So let's go ahead and click in here to add a new element, and we will add in a table. And in this case, we're going to add in table data that is going to come from Airtable, but we haven't actually built that connection just yet. We have to actually search for that information before we can share it here as a source of data. So it has to be a data source. So now back out here, I'm going to close this down and add another button or another element in front of this where we are finding that information. We're integrating here and we are looking at Airtable and we are going to perform a find. We want to get a list of records from Airtable. And you'll notice over here, this little icon that has the grid view, it's little rows and columns. This is telling us that this data is going to come back as something that we can use as a source. So this is what I want right here, a list of records that exist already in our companies in Airtable. So again, we have to authorize this to our Airtable account and choose our base. Again, we're using CRM template, and we'll go to the table ID and we're looking at companies here. We want to pull in those companies. Let's give it a test. This is what it's going to find. See the record ID here, and we have 10 different instances, 10 different companies that it's found. But what I really care about is the name here of the company, right? That's the part that I want to display in my interface and say, pick the company, let us know which one it is. So now that we've done this, we've got the green check on this particular action. We can go to the next step where we're adding that interface. Now we have to go back in here and sync it up to a data source. And now that we've got this properly working, we have a list of records right here. And what I care about most, again, is the name of the companies. So this is the list that I want to bring in, but you'll notice that by default, it's showing up as record ID, which doesn't help us much when we're working. So instead of using this, let's instead come down here to the headers. And I'm going to say, I don't care so much about ID. I want that fields dot name. That's the name of the organization. That's the one that's going to help us as we're going through this. So this is what I want. Pick the company, and we can even type that label in here, right? Let's go up here and say, select the company. And there we go. Easy enough, right? So we can make this step go through. Let's run it to create the sample data. And let's say I pick this company, Greenfield Core, and we say done. So now we have that information. This is the user input as we went through the automation. And we can use that in our final step here. So now when we create that contact, we can actually sync it up with the company. We know the company because they selected it back here in a previous step of the automation. But what about the other path? What if this company doesn't already exist in our CRM? Well, this is the otherwise branch. So here we need to present an interface again, and we're going to ask the user, what is the name of the company? And then taking that information, we need to create a new record in Airtable. So in this case, we're going to add a block that is a text input. We're asking for input from the user, and we're going to say, what is the company name? And we're good with that. We'll make this a required field. Whatever the name of the company is that they assign here, we're going to now use in our next step and plug it into a new company that we create in Airtable. But first we have to make sure to actually test this. We have to run to create sample data, and I'll say Gap Consulting is the name of this company, and we'll say done. So it will now use that in the next step on this branch, right? So over here, we'll close down our side panel where we're building. We'll add a new step here where we will again go to integrations and Airtable. And we're going to, in this case, create a record. And we, of course, have to sync to our account. We do this every time. And we will find the CRM again, CRM template. Our table ID here, we're creating a company. And all we need to do here is create a company with the name that was presented in the previous interface step. In this case, Gap Consulting, as you see right there. Let's plug that in, and we can test this step. And actually, if we pop into Airtable right now, we can actually see that company created if we come over here. And yet, there is no contact associated. Well, that's because we haven't wrapped up our automation. So we've created the record in one step, or in the other step, we identified the record. Well, what's the branch output? In either case, we need to know what the company is so that we can use it in the step where we create the record. Well, if the company exists, then we're going to take the information that we found in step 2, this one right here, where we identified the company. Now, what do I care about? I care about the company record ID. Because when we're working with records in Airtable, it's the record ID that matters the most. Now, the other thing that I care about is the other path here. So if we create our record, well, then we again care about the record ID. Now, if you're new to Airtable, this is not necessarily important to understand in order to use Ply. But with Airtable, each record has a unique record ID, and it always begins with REC. And whenever we're using records, it's best to use those IDs. So that's what I'm mapping here. So regardless of what happens here, we have the output of a record ID, and this is the company rec ID, rec for short for record. Now, before we move on to include this output in the creation of our contact record, first we need to test this step. So even if you have a successful test right here, I would suggest saying see sample data and make sure to test it. I've already done this once. We need to have something in here so that we can use it in that last step, even if you already have that green checkbox. So now we can go to creating a record. And I know we started a while ago, but we're finally getting back to the point where we can wrap all this up. We're going to come down here to the company, and we're only going to enter the one company. We are only ever going to have one output right here. So let's find it, branch output, bring in whatever the company rec ID is. That's the output that we established. Regardless of the path you take, we're going to use it here. Let's test the step now. We're going to flip back into our CRM now, and we're going to see that we now have that contact synced up with that company. So let's actually give this a test from scratch. I'm going to delete my company. I'm going to delete the new contact, that is me, and we're going to go into our email and test this from the beginning. But first, let's head back into Ply and be sure to publish the thing that we just built, spent all this time putting together. I know there are many layers to this because obviously there's a lot of logic that goes into apply more advanced automation like this, but I think you're going to agree with the output. It's going to be worth the time that we committed here. Before we go to the test though, I should also say that we can share this with our templates. We can share it with everyone who has access to the workspace. They can make it available and sync it up with their own email as well. It's a really great way to share a simple workflow like this across a whole team. But for us, I'm gonna just close the builder. We're back in email. I've already edited this. I've already added this. So we are now ready to give it a test. Remember, it's gonna use the email that is the from email as well as the name on that email account. So let's say add to CRM, or down here in the left corner, we see this thing working. Does the company yet exist? No, I need to create it. So what happens here? We say done, and we're gonna get the next one. What is the company name? Easy enough. It is Gap Consulting. I will say done again, and let's flip immediately into Airtable to see what happens. Just like that, you see this new record just popped in. I'll expand it so we can see it was created 6 seconds ago, as was this company record. So right here, it's properly linked up to Gap Consulting, created 13 seconds ago. So pretty cool stuff, right? We are able to now include ourselves in the automation process, which opens up a world of new possibilities when you're automating. I know we covered a lot in this video, so any questions that you have, swing by our website, check out the different resources we've put together, get some help if you need it. Of course, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, all those things, but most importantly, keep on building.